With the Knights of the Old Republic remake seemingly back on track, and with developments of the Revan's Revenge mod for Empire at War underway as well, I've been doing more Old Republic era reading, so I figured it'd be fun to take a look at the history of some of the party members in KotOR 1 and 2. For these videos, since the games have branching stories based on player choices, I'll usually be following the canon rule of thumb for them, that is, broadly light side choices, side quests are completed, Revan being male and the Exile Mitra being female where that impacts the story. To start us off, we'll be looking at the Jedi who I think I put second on my party member rankings, but who's always first in her own mind, Bastila Shan. Bastila was born in the galactic core region on the planet Tel Ravan to her mother Helena and her father, an unnamed treasure hunter. Bastila resented her mother in her early life, believing that it was her mother's fault that her father engaged in his dangerous treasure hunting lifestyle. The appearance of her force powers at a young age led her mother to giving her up to the Jedi Order, reinforcing Bastila's feelings that she was unwanted and unloved by her mother in particular, fueling some of her issues in trusting and loving others, which show up throughout the course of the game. When Bastila is reunited with her mother on Tatooine during Knights of the Old Republic, Helena was able to mend their relationship somewhat by explaining the truth of what had happened. She had been the one who prevented Bastila's father from taking Bastila on dangerous hunts, and giving her up to the Jedi Order had seemed like the best way to protect her from the danger that her father's choices would have put her in. Shortly before this reunion, Bastila's father had been eaten by a krayt dragon during one of these expeditions, so it was probably the right call. We don't know who her master was as a Padawan, but we do know she showed great promise during her early training. The Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide describes her as ultimately being a Jedi exemplar, and one of the most heroic Jedi of her time. She especially showed skill at battle meditation, a power which allows Jedi to, quote, infuse allies with hope while strangling enemy morale. Essentially, she could coordinate large-scale battles using the Force. This power was commonly used by Jedi in the wars against the Sith in the prior 1,000 or so years, and Bastila would continue that tradition. While it was a very potent power, it was one that few were ever able to learn, let alone master. Despite being strong in a power which could decide the course of entire wars, Bastila was not eager to use it. During the Mandalorian Wars, a pair of determined Jedi named Revan and Malak pled to the Jedi Order to involve themselves in the conflict, believing it was necessary to push back the invading Mandalorians by force. While many within the Order followed the Rogue Knights, the Council did not support them, and according to Mitra Surik in KotOR 2, Bastila spoke out very strongly against the idea of Jedi joining the war, discouraging others from following them. Now, a lot of these last few points have been a little bit different depending on which source you go by. While the campaign guide describes her battle meditation coming along relatively early by implication, in the Knights of the Old Republic games during a conversation with Karth, Bastila says that during the Mandalorian Wars, her battle meditation hadn't manifested itself yet. And while in the apparition scene in KotOR 2 with Mitra Surik, Mitra does say that Bastila argued against the Jedi joining, but in Knights of the Old Republic 1, in the same conversation with Karth, Bastila talks about it as if it was a choice of the Council, and that she had simply followed that choice rather than being one of its main proponents within the Order, which could have been a case where KotOR 2, like a lot of other later sources do, give a lot more prominence to some of the earlier characters before they would have really been as relevant. When Revan and his followers won the war only to fall to the dark side, the still very young Bastila became one of the leading figures in opposing him within the Jedi Order. She was selected to lead a strike team onto Revan's ship, and when Malak turned upon his cornered master, hitting him with a turbo laser barrage, Bastila used the Force to keep him alive, binding the two together. The campaign guide even gives Bastila credit for the idea to wipe Revan's mind, despite misgivings of the Council seeing it as a dark side move. These events led to the story of Knights of the Old Republic, where she teams up with the amnesiated Revan, if that's a word, bringing down Darth Malak and the Sith Empire after having been tempted to the dark side herself, temporarily serving as Malak's apprentice before Revan redeems her. The two began a romantic relationship following the events of the game, continuing a long Star Wars tradition of uncomfortable age gaps. Their romantic relationship and marriage came between the pair and the Jedi Council, even though the two had basically just saved the galaxy, and Revan once again found himself at odds with the Order. Rather than start a new civil war, ultimately a deal was made that they would just agree to disagree. The Council wouldn't speak out against Revan and Bastila's marriage, and in return Revan wouldn't go around telling the other Jedi that what he was doing was what they should all be doing. Bastila wasn't particularly comfortable with this arrangement or with the idea of staying silent, but Revan convinced her it wasn't worth an open conflict with the Jedi Council. Within the 2 years that followed the events of Knights of the Old Republic, Revan began regaining some of his lost memories, drawing him into the unknown regions to track down the true Sith Emperor, though Bastila wasn't aware of what he was seeking out. Before Revan left, the pregnant Bastila sent a final message to T3M4, who would be accompanying Revan. She told the droid that if something were to happen to Revan, T3 should find his way back to warn either her, the Jedi, or the Republic. Bastila would never see her husband again, but she soon gave birth to their son, Vaynor, because this family really likes to reorganize the letters in their name to make new names. When the Sith triumvirate of Darth Traya, Nihilus, and Sion began the Jedi Purge, Bastila's distant relationship with the Jedi probably factored into keeping her alive during the hunt. While her primary concern was keeping Vaynor safe, she had also joined in efforts to fulfill instructions left by Revan for the rest of the Ebon Hawk crew in KotOR 1 to watch over the Republic. We do get a scene of Bastila and Karth reunited in KotOR 2 on Citadel Station after meeting with Meetra Surik, so while Bastila did keep her distance from certain events, she did stay involved in at least some ways. T3, who had begun traveling with Meetra after returning from the unknown regions, was finally able to explain Revan's fate to Bastila and Meetra, prompting Bastila to give Meetra Revan's old mask, which would be the key to unlocking some of his memories, then sending Meetra and the Ebon Hawk back into the unknown regions to seek out the captured Revan. Following the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2, she seems to have led a relatively quiet life. She encouraged her son Vaynor, who wasn't Force-sensitive, to enter politics, saying the galaxy needed the leadership of people like him over people like herself and Revan by that point. She lived at least 50 years beyond Revan's disappearance and was able to meet her 2 grandchildren, Bress and Risa. While Vaynor may not have been Force-sensitive, Bress and Risa do seem to have been. We do know that generations later, her descendants did find their way back to the Order sometime in the next several hundred years, whether it was Bress and Risa or later on. The Old Republic mentions 2 generations of Shans who were members, including Jedi Knight Tassiel Shan and Grandmaster of the Order Satele Shan. Much like Bastila, Tassiel's views on marriage strained her relationship with the Jedi, resulting in a long period of exile. We don't really know if Bastila's relationship with the Jedi ever really recovered. The Order as it had existed during most of her life had been destroyed by the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2. So it's possible that she was involved with the other KotOR 2 party members or any other surviving Jedi in rebuilding the Order. The Jedi historian Nostaral does say that she reached the rank of Jedi Master at some point, but it's hard to say when that was, and Nostaral's information isn't always the most reliable in general. Either way, that's going to do it for our first look at the before and after of Knights of the Old Republic characters, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments which character you want to see next and why it's Bao-Dur. I have another animated battle recreation and breakdown ready to go for when Andor starts, so there's plenty of cool stuff to look forward to. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.